This is your chance to hear from two brilliant artists behind the solo exhibitions that we're opening tonight. They're both award-winning artists who have work in major collections and have exhibited internationally and have a lot of things to teach us. Gabrielle Goliath in the centre showed This Song Is For here in 2021 as part of our post-pandemic exhibition, The Normal, the powerful opening video that some of you may remember. Now, across all our White Gallery spaces, we are staging the equally brilliant Personal Accounts, a transnational decolonial black feminist project of repair. This careful and powerful video installation includes collaborations with survivors and allies in Johannesburg, Tunisia, Oslo, Milan, Stellenbosch, and now Edinburgh. Guadalupe Maravilla, on the right-hand side, has turned our Georgian gallery into a space for healing with his exhibition Piedras de Fuego, Firestones. Rooted in his personal story, having been an 8-year-old undocumented migrant and later battling cancer, his sculptures, paintings, wall drawings, and new album of sounds, which all incorporate learning from global healers and shaman, generously shares his transformative journey with us. Guadalupe will activate his sculptures at some time with a performance between 6 and 7 p.m. tonight. Moderating today is our colleague Victoria Okoye, a lecturer in Black Geographies at the University of Edinburgh. Victoria's research attends to the interdisciplinary and creative spatial practices of Black life to inform geographical notions of place in African and African diasporic contexts. We're lucky to have her with us tonight as we navigate these fascinating practices. So if we could all give a round of applause to get the event kicked off. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, James. Thank you to the Talbot Rice Gallery. Thank you to Gabrielle Guadalupe for joining us today. One of the things that we talked about when we sort of wanted to set the terms for this conversation is we were thinking about the deep attention to care that each of these artists brings to their work and the people that we work with. So this attention to care is something that is going to really ground this conversation. And then, as James said, at a certain point toward the end, we will open up this conversation. And this is just a reminder that we want to extend this care as you're thinking about the questions, what you want to bring to their works as well. Yeah? So in terms of setting the format, I have a couple of questions for both of the artists. And then I'll be asking individual questions, and then we'll go back to sort of joint questions, and then we'll open it up. So with that, Gabrielle Guadalupe, what is the starting point for us to think about your work?
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you all for being here. It's an honor to share the stage with both of you here. Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone in Talbot for bringing me here to participate and be part of this. So thanks to all. So yeah, for me, it's a lot of layers. My work, if you see my actual exhibition, there's a lot of layers to it. But ultimately, it is about sharing my lived experience of being a cancer survivor and being a child refugee from the Civil War in El Salvador to the United States, and how that is, my own experience have formed me into the person that I am, but also as the artist. So that is the foundation, and also just showing the power of art and how I can create microeconomies to help specific communities, but also just thinking about how I'm able to reach out to, for example, even yesterday when we did the ceremony, I can talk about healing in the art space and just go pretty deep sometimes with the work that I'm doing in reaching people, just doing all kinds of fundraisers and working with the cancer community as well. So just like really kind of exploring and all the possibilities that working with our institutions can offer, and all the flexibility that it has given me. So like that's to me, that's the start before I even think of materials.
It's thank you, Victoria, and it's also just such an honor to share the stage with Guadalupe and you, so thank you. And wonderful to gather with all of you today. I think for me, I would say a starting point, and it's interesting, of course, for us to think about it, because we're sitting and having this conversation as a preface to your experience of the exhibition. So it's happening in a different way but perhaps I would say that for me, a starting point is the work and your encounter that you're going to have with the work. And I believe in the transformative capacities of art. And so I think that that is the most apposite and urgent starting point. It happens within that encounter.
And both of you have ways of collaborating creatively, co-creating with others, for others. Can you talk about how this approach to collaboration, what it inspires for you? Why are you inspired to work in this way? Why is this important for you? And also, what does this open up in terms of potentials and possibilities for the work that you do?
For me, collaboration is a big central part of the work. It's like I do so many things with this. I create microeconomies. I'm able to hire a team of healers from all over the world to collaborate with me during the sound ceremonies, right? But I'm also going back to Central America and Mexico as an adult, as a U.S. citizen, and being able to confront these places that I crossed when I was 8 years old without my parents, and just kind of escaping the Civil War was a part of my healing journey as well. And during this healing journey, I discovered places and I started bringing objects that were part of my own personal shrines and my altars at home. And eventually these objects became part of the sculptures that you see. So all the objects there are found in these places in Central America and Mexico. So that started to develop further and further. But on top of that, I was able to meet people and make friendships and hire people to help me with my projects and start creating these microeconomies and creating jobs and doing all these things in these spaces. So the collaboration, it just kind of organically happens because I'm not looking for it. I'm just kind of in the market somewhere in Mexico, and I meet someone doing a craft in the street. I was like, oh, if I give you this design, can you do it? And they so on. Next thing you know, they're working for me full time for 2 years, right? So this thing kind of starts to evolve further and further. And next thing you know, I'm just part of their family. They're inviting me to go for someone's birthday and so on. And so these collaborations can be really heavily rooted over time. And sometimes it's just for one specific project, right? So it's a lot of layers with the work that I do as far as collaborating.
Yeah, I think I, like Guadalupe, I absolutely resonate with that so much. My practice is highly collaborative. That is bedrock to what I do. And I think what's really important to me, collaboration is, it's a political practice as well. So for me, I speak of it as a kind of politics of relationality. I am not, I always say this, I'm not the white male genius artist making work at a remove. Rather, I am deeply implicated within and entangled within a world of others. And so there's something about that drives the praxis and how I work, why I make the work I do, and those with whom I work. And so it's about being in relation with others and also really very carefully attending to as I say, what is it that makes possible hierarchized life within the world? Why do we all have such different experiences within the world? What produces differentially racialized, gendered, sexualized violence? And so for me to attend to those difficult intersections requires, or at least demands, that I work in sticky, difficult entanglement with others. And with that comes collaborative praxis.
So to follow up on this, Gabrielle, you frame personal accounts as a transnational, decolonial, Black feminist project of repair. So as you've said, it attends to very difficult experiences while also creating space for really moving transformation. Could you talk to us about how you come to this work? And what is the political demand of using transnational, decolonial Black feminist approach within your artistic practice?
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, Black feminist praxis is a creative force. It's liberatory. It's emancipatory. It's magisterial. It is what drives what I do. And in circling back to what I was saying earlier on, if it's thinking about these very different experiences that we have within the world, working in a way that looks to address and tend to these particular subject positions, black, brown, femme, queer, trans, indigenous subjecthood, and working from what is a politically driven drive that is black, that is feminist, that is about love, survival, and thriving. There is a deeply political imperative to do so, and to think about how, as an artist, making within this complex, difficult world of ours, how I can think about doing a kind of redressive and reparative work.
And Guadalupe, I almost just want to ask what drives you? Because I feel like I've heard you both now, since you've been in Edinburgh, but sort of preparing for this, talk about how your journey has really set you on this course of working through an artistic practice, that you're not just an artist, but you're using art to do particular things. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for me right now, it feels like I'm like riding a wave right now. And I don't know, it's not going to last forever, right? I feel like my inspiration is my lived story. And I see like all the migration and all the things that are constantly happening, and just being there for the cancer community that I work with, like those kind of things. But also know, like, because I'm doing so much, like I also realize that I'm not going to keep this space forever. And I see myself in the future, I don't know how long, maybe next year I'll be like a sheep herder somewhere. And I won't be making art. So I'm just riding this wave as far as I can until that expires. But I'm definitely going to keep evolving and changing. I just probably meditating in a mountain with my sheep, and that's it. But I'm not there yet. But for right now, I'm going full throttle with what I'm doing.
And for what you're doing now, it makes me think about how you use sound quite deliberately, how your art attunes to and works with sound. So, for example, as part of this exhibition, Disease Thrower is a shrine. It's a gong instrument that you use for sound healing. And so you work with, if I understand correctly, you work with sound not just as something we hear, but also as something that has literally the energetic potential to move something within us. Could you talk about how you came to work with sound and how sound informs your practice?
Yeah. So anytime I get asked this question, it's important to talk about that I had cancer 12 years ago, because for me, cancer was my biggest teacher. It still is. I'm still learning from that lesson. It transformed me as a person, but also as an artist. And I work with healers from all over the world, like working with plant medicine, meditation, sound as medicine, so on. Many things, many different methods of healing, Western medicine. Sound was a big part of it. When I was dealing with chemotherapy and radiation, sound was a big part of my healing journey. And automatically it went into my work. And before that, I was mainly known as a performance artist. And I was using a lot of sound as well. But after dealing with cancer, that was the big switch. That's when I learned that sound can be so much more, that sound can be medicine. And eventually, a few years later, it started kind of slowly coming into the work. As I started to use sound myself to heal myself from the cancer, the more I learned about it, the more it got integrated into my work. So that's how it came to be part of my practice.
And Gabrielle, in listening to the ways that you've talked about your work, both since you've been in Edinburgh, but also following you on Instagram and like listening to your YouTube videos, there's so much in your work about like an attention to care. Could you talk about the politics of care in your work for yourself, for those who you work with, for the ways that you approach this work that you do?
I think that I can actually really pick up on what Guadalupe and what you asked about sound. And I'm thinking I participated in the beautiful sound ceremony that Guadalupe held last night and created this extraordinary space for all of us. And he prefaced it with this discussion around sound and its capacity to heal. And I was really thinking about that and how I felt after, and how you drew our attention to our hearts and the vibrations through our hearts. And then, of course, I was also thinking about when I re-entered the space this morning and encountering the sound within my work, because the sonic, of course, is also such a significant thing. And I was thinking of the sounds of my work in relation to the sounds that you created for us last night, and how sound has this capacity to enter these multiple bodies, our bodies, the body of this architecture, sink deep into the bones, and I hope enact that reparative work, which I believe it will, and linger with us and resonate with us, and will leave with all of you within your bodies as you leave. So that, for me, becomes a really important affective register of care. Care manifests affectively, politically, socially. I even think of politically why I would turn to something like sound. If I think of broaching these very difficult subjects within my work, how do I do so without, to think alongside Saadia Hartman, how do I do so without replicating the grammars of violence? I look to alternative strategies like sound and light and voice and color, so as to refuse violence. And so care, it's about care for one another. It's about care for the participant, for the viewer who comes to the work. It's about the care enacted in relation to those within the work who participate and collaborate with me and work with me. That care is also facilitated by an extraordinary woman-led team at the Talbot Rice Gallery as well, who demonstrated such magnificent curatorial care. And so care is really, I know when I'm going slightly off track here, but when I was teaching, and there was a moment where students were feeling really quite discontent and dissatisfied, particularly during the student uprising in South Africa with the Fees Must Fall movement. And they spoke of these terms like, oh, you always saying care and this and that, and it rings hollow. But care is work. It is a praxis. You reminded me of that last night. It's ongoing. It's got a long durée. And it's something one has to be really attentive to and vigilant about in everything we do.
Guadalupe, it's so clear, Gabrielle, and you talked about the sound healing ceremony you did where we were laying on the ground and you were moving between our bodies, making the sound. And so it sort of like created these vibrations, but this was a practice of care that you were doing for us. And it also makes me think about how it's so clear how in your art, how for you, your art and healing, it converges within your work. The studio is a site of private ceremony or public ceremony. It's a site of meditation. It's literally where healing processes entangle with artistic production. Could you talk about how you came to this kind of approach? And could you talk about how this approach potentially unsettles some of the conventional ways that we know and experience the art gallery, the exhibition, artworks themselves?
Great question. I'm still exploring that. Like for this exhibition, the volcanic rock pieces that you see on the wall, I made them here. The volcanic rocks were brought from Mexico. I'm from the gallery in Paris, originally from Mexico, and I brought all the other parts here, and I had like 3 days to transform them, right? And just because of the situation that was the way of doing it. And I don't really have a studio right now. I'm almost nomadic with my studio, so this is a good way to actually make the works on site. And to me, that's exciting, right? It's like, okay, so now the museums can be a place where I can actually make the work completely. And something goes wrong, then I'll figure it out. But it's just like a challenge for me at this point. It makes it exciting. It keeps me going. So I don't know, maybe in the future I'll just make all the work in the museum the week before. So I don't know. That's the way it's going right now. but I keep challenging myself and just in the institutions, and I'm always grateful for the institutions to allow me to keep asking for these, very strange requests all the time. They're like, what, you're going to do what? So, and I appreciate the support that they give me. But I'm just kind of exploring, I appreciate those times, but sometimes I'm just like, I like trying different things because I put hundreds of thousands of hours in the studio already, and to me, it's like being collaborative, like finding things and like even just, there was a couple pieces that were missing and I'm just like, I need a missing part for one of the sculptures. And I went around here and I found this amazing like zebra rubber ducky thing that was like, oh, this is perfect. Right? And it connects to my own healing journey that I had this summer where I was using a lot of baths. And I was creating these baths with all these herbs and all these plants. And I was just making these Guadalupe soups where I would jump in there in hot water and just heal myself. And I thought that rubber ducky could accompany me in the soup, in the Guadalupe soup. So that's how I connected it. So, and I've never seen a rubber ducky. I mean, it's like a zebra with a duck bill before, and I found that here in Edinburgh. So just having the opportunity to kind of explore and play and just be loose and go with the flow is part of the work as well. So yeah, so again, to your question, it's like I'm just completely challenging myself all the time to see what happens. And just kind of really going with the flow and just listening and watching and observing and paying attention. So that's the thing. I didn't know what those pieces were going to look like until they were finished.
Gabrielle, your work places your collaborators, as you put it, shared breath and presence within this gallery. So it produces this deeply powerful experience. And as I was, researching and preparing for this conversation, I came across a piece of writing, I think it was a written interview where you talk about a previous exhibition, Chorus, and you said, quote, "Because I believe that any form of art making carries with it a capacity to wound. Rather than re-perpetuate the trauma I broach in my work, I seek to enable a different, hopefully more human and relational aesthetic encounter." So reading this and then having the opportunity to sit with your work, it really is shaping for me how I'm coming to personal accounts as a powerful site of encounter. And I'm wondering if you could talk to us about how this more human, more relational encounter that you invite us to, could you talk about this more human relational encounter that you're inviting us to, in particular in this shared breath as part of personal accounts?
Yes, absolutely. And the emphasis on that word encounter, as you encounter and come to a form of radical relation. So to qualify this form of relationality, and I think it is also always having to acknowledge the incommensurability of our experiences. So with a work like Personal Accounts, you're invited into an encounter with these extraordinary survivors who had something to gift to you, to offer to you. And I think in that form of relation, in what is happening in that foregoing of lexicality, what is happening as you come to a form of knowing that rests on an unknowing, that you come to this and you are faced with the moments in between, the spoken words that are meant to render us as knowable or transparent to one another are withheld. And instead you come up against it's a deeply affective and poetic, I think, form of opacity. And this is really the kind of politics, agential politics in actual fact, that drives a work like Personal Accounts, because particularly with a work like this, these are individuals whose narratives or accounts are so regularly undermined, disbelieved, discredited. And even if they are to speak, are they heard? And so I'm really trying to trouble this idea of those who have a voice and those who do not. This work is not claiming to give a voice to anyone, nor is it looking to traffic in pain and suffering. These are also, in actual fact, many of these accounts are about art and imagination and poetry and music. And so I think that's really key as you come to share this affective space with the individuals that you encounter within this work.
And Guadalupe, as part of your exhibition, you have these beautiful woven hammocks suspended from the ceiling that provide a resting space for your ancestors. For me, this resonates so much as an Igbo diasporan and someone who practices, it's called Odinani or Omenala. It is an indigenous Igbo spirituality system, and so something that is so central to this is how we commune with our ancestors. And so as I come to your work, it makes me think about how ancestral relation is not just about the ancestors that we can identify. It is also this recognition that we are part of this much longer and larger story. Could you talk about what is the role of invoking ancestral relation? What is the role of practicing ancestral relation within your work?
No, thank you for asking that. Yeah, that's a big part of it. Again, going back to my cancer journey, which I feel like healing, it's going to be forever. Healing, that's like, I think certain things that are really challenging, like they could be a lifetime of healing. Some things, yeah, obviously you can heal a lot faster. But during that journey, in the very beginning, my ancestors really helped me get through that time. But not only my ancestors, but my descendants is what I talk about. I don't have any children. I don't even know who my descendants will be. They could be my students, right? They could be someone that I'm mentoring, right? They could be a friend. So those might be my descendants, right? And it's just like really kind of giving back to certain communities, and that group can be descendants, right? So thinking about my ancestors, but also my descendants. So when I was healing from cancer, I keep getting this message through my meditations that I needed to heal 7 generations back, but also 7 generations forward. And for me to fully heal from cancer, I needed to do both. So whatever trauma has been passed down from this kind of, these generational experiences that my ancestors have had, like if I'm healing myself properly, what I mean by that is like through meditation, self-care, and doing all the work that I'm doing with all the communities that I work with, I would eventually heal myself and the 7 generations back, 7 generations forward. 3 years ago, I had a show in New York, and my solo show there, and the name of the show was 7 Ancestral Stomachs, and he talked about the healing of the gut of generational trauma, because a lot of the trauma that we carry is somewhat held in the gut, and it's where I had cancer. So, but also healing from that is also healing the future. So that's my relationship to the ancestral question you gave me.
And Gabrielle, you talked about this a little bit in terms of, you mentioned refusal. In personal accounts, we experience a visual and sonic sound work where the spoken words of these individuals is withheld. And some of us might come to this work thinking about and making the connections to, for example, institutional failings, right? That silence or don't listen to survivors, allies. Yet I see your work, as you've mentioned, as this practice of refusal and agency, which you talked about. Could you talk to us about refusal? Because it feels like for we who come to your work as audiences, there's something about refusing what we might think we're entitled to, or what we are owed, what we should have access to. So could you talk to us about refusal? And in practicing refusal, what are you directing our attention toward?
Refusal is a practice of survival as much as it is a practice of care. the conditions of making this work and inviting collaborators to this work were very much shaped and informed by many of the decisions they made and would consent to. And, on the one hand, I think it's really important to acknowledge that for so many of these individuals, to disclose their identity renders them even more precarious. To share their story in a way that's meant to conform to the tyranny of veracity renders them precarious. And so this practice of refusal in itself is a gesture of care, making possible a different kind of terms of engagement and opening up a space of care and safety for those to enter into this work and participate within it. Refusal is emancipatory as well. Refusal is a refusal to be perennially tethered to the frame of victimhood itself, a reductive and violent frame and subject position. A refusal to be that and to exceed that and to lay claims to survival and to life, to repair, to healing, to that ongoing praxis. And so it is the decolonial black feminist praxis of survival and refusal. These are the fugitive strategies enacted not only in abstract discursive ways, but in life, in ordinary quotidian life. And that is something that I look to, but that is absolutely asserted by so many individuals that participate within this work.
Guadalupe healing, both for oneself and for others, is energetic work. It takes energy. And it's so clear the energies that you put into your artworks. How do you manage, if it's boundaries or balance or this relation between practices of healing and practices of producing public artworks?
Yeah, so I always talk about how my art is a Trojan horse in this way because because of the imagery that it has and the color and the texture and the objects that are, people get intrigued by it. And, I always talk about how all of a sudden it's like really, next thing you know, they're in yoga mat doing a ceremony. And they're, even though they don't have a meditation practice, start to realize that, wow, start questioning what healing is. And to me, that's, and you're doing this at a museum, and right? So it's like, so people start questioning what healing is to them, and sometimes they start asking me questions about how can I continue this meditation on my own, and so on, and it starts to raise a lot of questions about that self-care and that self-love that I always talk about that no one else can give us, and which I believe is the foundation to all healing. So, but yeah, so like it's all one thing together for me because I don't really separate myself as an artist and a healer. I'm both, right? So I see my work as both, and yeah, and I'll be able to use institutional spaces, galleries, museums, churches, playgrounds into healing spaces, and it's for everyone. This summer, I did a ceremony in Texas, in the United States, and I invited the Border Patrol to come in. And we actually had 3 Border Patrol officers arrive to the ceremony. And they were very emotional about it because they've been arresting immigrants that are crossing the border of Mexico and the U.S., and they were talking to me as I was like that 8-year-old that they rescued. And they were very emotional telling me the stories. And again, this is an art setting that helped create this space for us. So again, at the time when we're having this conversation, then I'm doing a ritual for them and an offering of sound and healing for people that are known as being aggressive and arresting immigrants and refugees coming to the United States. It was really touching and again, creating an institutional space to do that. When we're doing it, we forget where we are sometimes, but then afterwards, oh, we did this in this museum. But yeah, so I'm just like really kind of trying to navigate the space that I'm creating because it's all like brand new to me.
And it makes me think how for both of your works, there is this, as part of this collaborative process, but also who you're working with, there's this, it seems like you both bring this sense of openness in the sense of things are not overdetermined from the very beginning, which I really, I just want to say how much I appreciate that, in the ways that you both talk about your work. And I also want to think with both of you about this question of time and temporality in your work, about how you engage with time and temporality, because there's a way that maybe I see it. I don't know if you also think about this as well. But I'm thinking about your rich orientations to repair, Gabrielle, Guadalupe, how you talk about healing, and how for both of these processes, this is never this sort of linear developmental framework. This is not about working from past, present, future. It's about, you know, for example, how we might continue to carry this baggage with us, right? I'm thinking of dream backpacks, Guadalupe. I'm thinking of, Gabrielle, the ways that you talk about and how your practice is about how to cultivate more affirming conditions, and the ways that we recognize how our ancestors are still with us. And the way, for example, Guadalupe, you talk about both your ancestors and your descendants. And also doing work with others takes time. I'm thinking about just since you've been in Edinburgh, seeing how you have undertaken this work, right? And even before. What's the role of time? How do you think about temporality through the ways that you do your practice?
Well, I always speak of my own practice as a life work. So that temporal aspect of it is fairly key. There's a long durée to it. Often my works are serial and durational in nature. And so time plays out slowly and over a long period of time. I've been thinking of a work like Personal Accounts, which I first initiated in 2014 and have revisited. But I think that really also, from a temporal perspective, I think of my practice as reparative, redressive, and as attending to. And really it's thinking about this regime of representation. And I'm not only talking about the work of aesthetics, I'm talking about colonial modern order that shapes life as we know it, for each and every single one of us. And so hundreds of years of colonial and imperial violence that has made possible differential valued life. And thinking of this as the aftermaths that we continue to live with and contend with. And this is something that is really key in terms of how I approach the work, how I make, what I'm thinking, and this notion of, which was quite a radical and profound realization for myself when I began to think of it as life work, as a life pursuit, is absolutely something that I'm always thinking of politically, but of course also poetically, and futural, as you were saying earlier on, attending to the, if we are to imagine and think of a world otherwise, one that is not inhospitable, one that does not produce differential, disposable, ungrievable, unlovable life, then it takes this careful investment, temporal investment, in thinking very carefully of the past and a present that is not possible without a different future.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And the time for me is really, it works very differently. Right now I'm going, this is like my 9th city, like in 6 weeks doing projects like this. So I move really fast, but then it just slows down. And I'm just in my apartment in New York and I'm just meditating 3 or 4 times a day. And I'm just there. And it's just time is very different than now. So it tends to switch over. But immediately when you asked that question, I was thinking about, I got to call and check in with a lot of people. people that I've met just in the last 6 weeks. People either with cancer or other refugees or people undocumented that I met in the last 6 weeks, and continue these conversations and in this bond that we built. As soon as I get out of here, just thinking about all the past ones for the last 7 years or 10 years that I've developed as well, and checking with those people, because in some cases I haven't talked to them in a few years, right? And we'll see where they are, because I know I helped them for like a little bit, but I kind of lost track of them. And thinking of like how time, for me, it feels like this was like 2 months ago, but actually it was like, wow, that was like 5 years ago when we first met, right? So it's like really thinking of like, how do I'm going forward, but also have to step back and like think of the past as well. Always looking for what's in front of me with whatever project I'm doing next. So yeah, that's that question kind of made me think of the people that I worked with in the past as well.
So I'm a lecturer in Black geography, so I want to ask a geography question. But this is also thinking with what you were just saying. Both of you, you are exhibiting these works here. You are doing this exhibition here. And I imagine that this is one of many places with which either you have exhibited this previously or will exhibit this, moving in different locations across the globe. And it makes me think about in every place it is deeply situated, right? There are different possibilities and potentials based on how it is situated. So for example, like the realities of that location, who you're working with, whom you encounter, the audiences, how they also encounter your work. Could you share how you think about and how you situate your works in location, in a local context? How have you responded to this local show here in Edinburgh?
I always speak of my work as being work in spite of, and I'm talking about those political conditions of impossibility that renders this world inhospitable. It's a world that is anti-black, anti-femme, anti-poor, anti-queer. And so thinking alongside cartography and geographies, I really would like to see that in spite of this impossibility, I like to think of my own work and personal accounts as a work that looks to open up possibility. I see it as space making, and there are many extraordinary, alongside Victoria, Black feminist thinkers really thinking about Black feminist geographies. So I really see personal accounts as looking to do that and make possible those kinds of spaces. And then, of course, the significance of a work like personal accounts, which is, having made the first iteration, which I produced in South Africa and was very much directed towards the precarity of Black and brown women in South Africa. And as the work and other works of mine have traveled outside of South Africa and people coming into contact with it and it tapping into broader communities in diverse spaces, from Oslo to Basel to Sao Paulo to Gothenburg, and it resonating with others and opening up these spaces for conversation and intimate relation, realizing this imperative to, with this particular work towards a transnational dialogue, and how to do so in a way that works across these different geographies towards a form of allyship, but without collapsing difference and intersectional difference, but nonetheless striving towards a form of allyship. So the question of geographies with a work like personal accounts is really quite key, because I always seek, wherever the work shows, to put these different cycles in relation to one another. So they are sounding out collectively. Here you encounter the cycle Mango Blossoms, produced here in Edinburgh, and that is of great significance. And then, of course, the cycles produced in Como and Johannesburg, and it's really an important aspect of the work. That being said, it's also not to tie these either one of these cycles to a singular experience, and I think we can really think quite closely alongside a cycle like Mango Blossoms, which is made up of people living here, passing through here, trying to make a way here for themselves. And of course that's thinking alongside the immigrant experience as well. So those are important aspects of it.
For me, my own experience, it is about the migration from Central America to the United States and in that land, in that space, in the U.S.-Mexico border. So as I travel and exhibit like everywhere all over the world, I start realizing how displacement and migration is everywhere as well, right? And what I do is every time I have an exhibition internationally or in different cities in the U.S., there's a children's game from El Salvador, where I'm from. It's a Tripachuca game. And basically, you see it in the exhibition here. There's murals everywhere, and they were made here. And what's important about that game for me is that I actually, every time I travel, I make this game in collaboration with someone that is local, that has a background of being displaced or can be a cancer survivor as well. And we collaborate behind the scenes, and we'll make these drawings. And again, we make a microeconomy around this game, and the museum institution pays this person to play the game with me. And in this case, it was someone from El Salvador that was also a refugee from El Salvador, but also I was able to create a microeconomy with the institution. But in the past, like last year, I was in the Gwangju Biennial in Korea, and I guess the biennial, they hired someone that was had defected from North Korea to come play with me. And in São Paulo Biennial last year, I played with someone from Ghana that was displaced there and a refugee as well. Last year, in March, in my solo show in New York, in my gallery, I had I met someone that was from Afghanistan, and she had escaped the Taliban, right? And she was in the States. But it's not only the game, and also obviously the microeconomy is important. But then I start to build a relationship, a connection with them, and we share stories of migration from different places. And I start to learn how different displaced peoples, like they live in different cities, and I understand the cities even more and their struggles in those places to get jobs or build new families or new homes, new relationships. Yeah, so this is part of the work, and just even coming here on top of everything that I'm doing, it's like, okay, we have to find that person that is the right person to play the game with me. And again, challenging the institutions to help me figure out this practice that is very ephemeral, because, and in some cases, I've been very lucky so far that institutions have always been able to find someone to play the game with me, and they've found the greatest people to play the game with me, because again, I formed relationships and bonds with them that are still ongoing. But yeah.
So we are going to now open this, this conversation we really tried to ground in care and thought. But I just want to ask one last question. And this is because the way that this is structured for us is that we are hearing from this artist talking about their processes and their practices and their intentionality and their work. And then you all have the experience today and moving forward for the next few months to come and experience their works. And so I just want to ask, so first of all, get ready with your questions, and James will move around with the roving mic. But I just want to ask, bearing this in mind, that people have not yet experienced their work and they're going to go out and experience your work, what are the questions? Are there questions you would like us to sit with as we engage with your work? What are those questions? Are there particular things you want us to notice or to think about? And it's interesting because we're all educators or have been educators, right? Or do you want to sort of leave it open?
Yeah, it was like, surprise me.
Gabrielle?
Well, for me, I think thinking through the politics of bestowal and patronage and how regularly that might be disallowed to individuals within my work. As you enter that space, as you come into that encounter, what are these offerings? What are these gifts? And what do they have to teach me? And what might I leave with once I exit the space?
Thank you so much. So, James will move around with a roving mic. We have just a few minutes. I'm sorry, we really went over. I was into this. Thank you so much. But also, remembering that the care that each of these artists bring to their work, we're extending this out, right? What questions do you all have for Guadalupe, for Gabrielle?
Thank you. Hello, and I'm really pleased to be here, and it's been really, really interesting to listen to you. I have a fairly simple question. We've heard the word love. We've heard the word care quite a lot, discussed in various ways. And I was just reading number 3, Guadalupe, in your little book, and forgive me if I'm not saying this correctly, the Sana Sana Colita Durana, where there's a little heal, heal, little frog's tail, which is a little chant that's often used to console hurt children, basically saying, the frog's tail will grow back. So my question is about hope, because that is about, setting a hope in motion. And I want to ask where hope figures in your practice, in your ability to continue to do this work, because I'm very sure that it's hard in many ways, and how hope perhaps figures in as an audience or somebody connecting with your work, you think. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so just thinking of the word hope, it's like, when I do my cancer ceremonies, it's really important to, I'm not going to heal everyone from cancer by doing a sound ceremony. It's very clear. But with the work that I'm doing and the meditations, I invented a specific meditation for cancer survivors, people dealing with cancer. If they can come out of there with hope, it's really important for me. Because when I was going through cancer, I was on a daily, I was looking for anything to give me a little bit of hope, any little glimmer of hope, just to get to the next day, right? So if I can provide for someone for one day or maybe even longer, I'm doing the work that I'm doing. So it just goes a lot further than that. But also, there's a lot of layers because of so many different communities and the different types of works that I do. So I resonate with what you're saying.
Should we take maybe one more question?
Yeah, one more question.
Well, first, thank you, Talbot Rice Gallery, for bringing this amazing collaboration, these exhibitions to Edinburgh. My question is about repair and renewal. How do you, as artists, who must suffer through this creation, from listening to survivors, from struggling with cancer, how do you individually and collectively heal yourselves?
That's actually, it's a great question, and it is something I have responded to on numerous occasions. And I think, thank you. I think it is a question lodged in concern and care, which is really wonderful. But I think one thing for me, perhaps, is also to perhaps flip it slightly or shift it slightly, and to say that the implication there is that the work carries the capacity to harm, to perpetuate suffering, whereas I find that it's the opposite. And so, whilst there is undoubtedly difficulty in engaging with the suffering and pain of another, I find that I regularly turn to my practice and to those encounters with others for growth, for nourishment, for sustenance, for learning. There's such deep pedagogies that exceed the learning of the academy that I find within the practice. And so I also, as I said earlier on, I frame it as life work. And it's also not only in the sense of it being this ongoing life pursuit, but it is life-giving.
Yeah, so for me, I don't see cancer as suffering. For me, it wasn't suffering. I felt I had 1.5 bad days in 2 years. I felt that it was my journey. I was very positive the whole time. I felt that it was going to be transformative, and it was going to be my biggest teacher, and it became that. So I see it like that, and it's because I felt it wasn't my time to go yet, right? So I knew I was being taught something. I was 35 years old, in grad school, just dealing with that, and I was like, it's not my time yet. It was very clear, but it was a huge turn for me as far as growth in so many ways, and I'm still learning from it, and it's actually catapulted me to keep growing on a daily. I'm going to be a different person in 3 months, and like I even said, I might shift my life to being a sheep herder in 6 months or in 6 years or whatever, right? I'm just going with the flow, and I've also learned from the cancer experience too that whatever the world throws at me, that's my path, no matter how difficult it is, right? And I'm not going to let it, I just got to go through the storm, no matter what it is and whatever's coming. That's my path, and I'm going to learn something from it. I'm not going to pout and cry my way through it. I'm just going to stay positive, get through it, and that's my mission, right? So that's the way I see everything that gets thrown at me, every challenge, because there are going to be many more. This is not the end of it. Hopefully not more, right? But whatever it is, that's my path. But how I take care of myself is I have my meditation practice, right? I try to keep my mental health as strong as possible because of meditation. Nutrition is my biggest supporter. I'm just very careful what I put in my body because I feel like nutrition is one of the biggest challenges that is causing a lot of illnesses in the world right now because all the food is political, right? The food is contaminated. Only the organic food it's healthy, and who can afford that, right? So there's a lot of politics in that. So I'm very fortunate that I can get to choose my organic, affordable food, right? I mean, that I can afford, right? So it's like, but not everyone can. You know, it's like a part of the work that I do when I work with undocumented communities in New York. It's like, how can I talk about healing and using sound as medicine if my audience is hungry? If my audience is cold, they don't have coats, and they're in New York City in the winter, right? So for me, healing doesn't start just by doing ceremonies. I'm really thinking of the communities and the needs that they have. It's basic needs of food and necessities. So it is a lot of layers to the work. But ultimately, how I do end up protecting myself is my daily meditation, that self-care and that self-love that I constantly talk about in my ceremonies and everywhere I go. So like I feel like everyone's their own healer, everyone's their own medicine. We just don't know the tools, right? And that's the work that I'm doing. I'm sharing information from all the experiences that I've learned, but it's out there. It's in nature. You don't need to have a $5,000 gong to do a ceremony, right? You can sit in front of the ocean. You can sit in the park, listen to the birds and the trees, the wind creating sound. That's medicine. It's all everywhere. We just have to create that 15-minute gap a day to sit there. And sometimes it's like, you can just skip Instagram for 15 minutes and go to the park. And that sound is medicine, right? So that's the way I see it. But I make that time, as busy as I am, make that time to do that work. And that's how I protect myself.
Thank you both so much for this conversation. Thank you for your openness in relating how you approach your practice, how you approach repair and healing, and thinking with incredibly difficult topics, but not making your work about these difficult topics, making this work about creating affirming spaces, about practices of working with others. I feel like there's so much for us to learn from in their work, both now and to continue as we experience their work. So thank you so much for this conversation. Where's James? That's the end. Thank you all so much.